Number one Ibble Dibble here. And we're back. I believe, like all of you who listen to my little rounds, and thank you, by the way, you could have been anywhere in the world tonight, but you're here with me, and I appreciate that. I trust the former queen's judgment and wholly believe Megs shouldn't merge her title out of respect for their Sandringham Summit understanding, if nothing else. But we know megalomaniac doesn't know respect. And so in this 3-video cycle, I'm elaborating on why merging the title Duchess of Sussex is actually, really, honestly, not a good business move from both an immediate practical and long-term image building standpoint. If you haven't seen my previous 2 videos on this, they're linked in the cards above and the description box below. In those videos, I gave you the main reasons why a royal and/or noble title is not as valuable as Meghan thinks it is in the context she's trying to exploit it. I believe there are 3 loose sociological factors contributing to this that I'm calling the British factor, the female factor, and the foreign factor. Video 1 explained why all the other British peers aren't doing this, and video 2 explained why American duchesses specifically get a really bad rap. In this video, I want to wrap up the foreign factor and introduce what I'll call the title paradox. Yes, this will be another boring history lesson. I promise I will review the aesthetics more deliberately in a future video, but this is not that.
I was dreaming of a It's level displayer, so pray for the players.
The title paradox is an unspoken social rule among aristocrats. Nobles with money are not allowed to merge their titles unless they do so for charity. Nobles with no money are allowed to do so because they're charity cases themselves. It's assumed that any noble so broke they are merging their title is even more embarrassed than they are broke, and that's why, in British culture anyway, there's a tradition of swooping in and caring for poor relations if at all possible. The opus of Jane Austen is largely artistic reflections on this reality. If a noble plans to merge purely for glory or profit, they are expected to leave their family and their good name out of it. Everyone already knows who they are, and if they don't, all the better. It seems counterintuitive, but assuming anyone merging their title is broke as a joke, which is what people are currently assuming about Meghan, is actually doing them a kindness because there are only 2 alternatives. The first is that they are both unspeakably greedy and arrogant. Greedy insofar as they will use their title, something they were either born with or married into, not something they earned, to gain competitive advantage over real merchants rather than rely on the merits of their product. Arrogant in that they assume buyers will value their title enough to buy it instead of buying a more genuinely established alternative and/or pay a premium for it. The second is that the noble is an unspeakable snob. And I use the word unspeakable because while covert snobbery is still mostly the order of the day and even lauded in the British upper classes, overt snobbery is a failure and a sin. There's also some intersectionality with concepts of legitimacy and xenophobia here, so let's get into it. So between 1900 and 1970, an unbelievable number of monarchs were dethroned worldwide. Of course, we all know the biggies: China, Russia, Austria-Hungary, Germany, Italy, Turkey, but there are so many more we just hear less about. Korea, Morocco, Poland. We hear a bit more about the really late hangers-on like Greece, Ethiopia, and Iran, probably because they're still in living memory and easier to make TV documentaries about. And that's not to mention the various claimants from long deposed royal families who tried to reclaim power once released from colonialism and instead got similarly kicked out sooner rather than later. With royalty abolished, nobility no longer had any legitimate power, apart from the status and influence their wealth and reputation would afford them anyway. Accepting perhaps the nostalgic respect of steadfast traditionalists and whatever of their manners were retained among their own. Those that could remain in situ in reasonable comfort, in Italy or in Germany, for example, usually did. Those who couldn't fled west. The first wave of these classiest of refugees mostly targeted England, France, Switzerland, and Monaco, and brought with them the priceless jewels and various family heirlooms and trinkets they fled with, all by Fabergé, Boucheron, Musy, and Chaumet, of course. Of course, none of them knew how to work, so they generally lived off the kindness of others, preferably royal relatives, and wrote memoirs. They were the creme de la creme, the end of an era, the epitome of glamour, exotic, mysterious, fabulously dressed, the ultimate gets for social gatherings, infinitely charming, fish out of water, tastemakers before that was a word, and to finally inch towards my point, they gave many aspirational plebes their first opportunity to buy a piece of royalty or aristocracy, a bracelet, a clock, an old dress that could be restyled, or maybe their presence at a party. Simultaneously, there was immense wartime suspicion about foreign nobles and where their loyalties lay. In 1915, the Emperor of Austria, the German Emperor, the King of Württemberg, the Grand Duke of Hesse, Prince Henry of Prussia, the Duke of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, and the Duke of Cumberland were all struck off the rolls of the Order of the Garter. And in 1917, after 3 years of discussion in the House of Lords on the problem of alien peers, as they called it, the Titles Deprivation Act removed the titles from the Duke of Cumberland and his heir, the Duke of Albany, and Viscount Taffy, the so-called traitor princes. Interestingly, they were given 2 years to come around until 1919 before their peerages were formally, totally stripped. Of course, they never came around, and none of their heirs to this day have ever petitioned for reinstatement, and they could. The most obvious artifact of how serious and prevalent this sentiment was is, of course, the renaming of the House of Saxe-Coburg-Gotha to Windsor, but Battenberg also became Mountbatten, and George V refused to send a boat to rescue the Romanovs for fear of the already widely hated absolutist German Tsaritsa Alex turning the working classes Republican. Now, I need you to tell me what you think. I had always thought the titles were stripped summarily when the law passed. I didn't realize before I looked it up again that there was a built-in come-to-Jesus buffer of 2 years, even as World War I continued. This insight helped me understand why the Queen insisted on a strict in or out decision from Harry and Megs and 1-year deadline at the Sandringham Summit. She recognized Harry and Meg as another traitor prince with a dangerously unlikable wife. I'm sure on some level she hoped that a year would be time for enough nights out with Peter Phillips or Sophie Winkleman to realize they actually didn't want to work that hard and they actually did have it pretty good, but knew in her heart of hearts that they were never, never going to admit they were mistaken. Like those Germans in her grandfather's day, they were no longer living in the country, their house was half packed up, and they were missing meetings. Worse, they lied about where they were going, why they were going, how long they planned to stay, disparaged the UK in general, and the royal family specifically, while abroad. The way Harry describes the meeting in the Netflix series, he makes it seem like the Queen was rather quiet because she was getting bulldozed by an extremely pissed off William and hopelessly disappointed Charles, but I think she was quiet because she had her mind made up before she walked in the room, and that was Harry's last chance to redeem himself. And as the afternoon unfolded, she saw he was too stupid and stubborn to even realize it, and she'd have to protect not the present family members per se, but the entire House of Windsor from his cheap exploitation. What do you think? Do you agree? Close parenthesis. All of this was also happening maybe in the third quarter of the American wife invasion of the British aristocracy I discussed in my last video. Consequently, for perhaps the first time since the Restoration, British nobles realized they could and would be tried in the court of public opinion for not being British enough. The idea that some nobles were fake and some nobles were real, and foreign nobles weren't real, and foreigners couldn't maybe be real nobles, and that Britishness in toto was diminished by the incorporation of any foreignness, and indeed that Britishness itself somehow is above and apart from both its Anglosphere cousins and European neighbors, swirled in the popular imagination. There had been pretenders before, but never so many has-beens, never so much pay for play and all the potential disloyalty it implies. For every fake Grand Duchess Anastasia tricking sycophants out of their money to pay for healthcare, there was a real Grand Duchess Olga just trying to get by on a working farm with her husband and kids. Living outside their palaces, wearing neither jewels nor court attire, speaking in indiscernible, mingling foreign accents, it was quite difficult for most people to tell the real thing from the imposter. The British spy novel is widely considered to have evolved into its current form between 1893 and 1914. 100 years later, the perception that it is actually quite common to be noble and that many nobles are disappointingly or refreshingly, depending on your point of view, common persists. In the UK and the US, mainly because Asian, Arab, and European royals and nobles frequently have their children educated there. Stereotypical posh degrees are geography for boys, art history for girls, and various others that easily lend themselves to the luxury heritage marketing world. And many will stay for at least the early part of their professional careers or sometimes forever. Princess Beatrice, for example, lived in the US for over 4 years, and her husband is the son of a count who was raised in Italy but sent to boarding school in Somerset and never went back. Seriously, in the luxury heritage marketing world, real estate, fashion design, art galleries, vineyards, you can't throw a stick without hitting a Graf, a Comte, or a Marchese. Beatrice and Edo are great examples. Basically, she is a highly paid professional networker, and Edo is a real estate developer. With her international relations degree, travel hobby, and marriage into the British royal family, Meghan should know inside and out the power of these dualities. Titled but foreign, regal but exotic, British but dangerous, royal but in reduced circumstances, could all be leaned into and played up in a really fun way in Meghan's brand building, particularly now that the Queen and Philip are gone. But she seems to perceive that characterization as an insult, not an opportunity, and instead gives us Saint Meghan Markle, a straight-laced, buzzword spewing, charity photo op abusing, transparent fake with an eternally clenched jaw. She is far more Matahari than Princess Diana, and if she just embraced it, it might actually work. Fergie was out getting her toes sucked and selling access to Andrew, and people still love her. Princess Michael told people at a restaurant to go back to the colonies and kicked off a 2-month debate on blackamoor art in the English-speaking world, culminating, if I remember correctly, in an editor getting fired from Home and Garden or something. People love her, or at least love to hate her and show up to her speaking engagements. To conclude, no, I do not believe she should be using her title. Of course I don't. But if she insists on using it, she has to take a hard look at other royals who, at different points in time, were extremely unlikable, but went on to merch their titles, and figure out how to lean into being a tongue-in-cheek villain. In my opinion, people love a villainess with a good stylist and a fun speechwriter who can tell her the right things to say, write some jokes for her instead of the off-putting social justice posturing she usually does. This could work. Okay, those are my thoughts for today. Let me know how you feel in the comments. Toodles! Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.